like the emotions is what, that's why we're humans. It's the most wonderful aspect of us is because of our range of emotions.
Welcome to Back to the Future podcast. My name is Victor Sadia, and I talk with brilliant minds and hearts of people who want to uproot and transform the current health and wellness paradigm. Merritt Moore is known for her dual career as a professional ballet dancer and a quantum physicist. She holds a degree in physics from Harvard University and a PhD in quantum optics from the University of Oxford. Alongside her scientific achievements, Merritt has danced with prestigious companies such as the English National Ballet and Zurich Ballet. Her work explores the intersection of creativity and science, notably through her dances with robots on stages all around the world. In this episode, we delve into the intricate dance between creativity and science, exploring how the act of asking the right questions can lead to groundbreaking discoveries. We reflect on the challenges of navigating dual passions in both ballet and quantum physics, emphasizing the importance of embracing vulnerability and rejecting shame to fuel creativity. Merritt shares her insights of the need for a holistic approach to education, where conversation and emotional connection take precedence over traditional textbook learning. Through her journey, she invites us to consider how the unpredictable and improbable can lead to profound breakthroughs in both art and science, so that maybe one day these worlds are not treated as separate, but one and the same. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Today we have Merritt Moore. Merritt, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So let's go back 400 years to a time where one of the father of modern science, René Descartes, said or wrote, cogito ergo sum, which is, I think, therefore I am. In a sense, I think that this has led us to Westerners, at least, to equate our identity with our minds instead of with our whole organism. So, what are the benefits and dangers of equating our identities as humans just to our mental life?
Interesting. Well, there was a really great TED Talk by Sir Ken Robinson. I don't know if you've seen it, where he talks about how in school we're only just focused on the brain, and then we just use the entire rest of our body as this transportation system for the brain, but we never work on educating the body as well. And so that quote and what you were just saying kind of led me to remember what he had talked about. And I do think we forget a lot about the mind body connection and how they fuel each other.
Yeah, he was making fun of scientists who just go to conferences and their bodies, they're just transportation systems for their brains. And now that we are talking about, let's say, lifestyle and nutrition and movement and stress techniques, and incorporating the body, we are seeing even neuroscience is telling us that we are the body. We are this multi-species symbiosis that's happening in our body, and the mind. It's not only connected, but it is itself. It is the body, right?
100%, right? It is a muscle. It needs to be trained and worked. And with the students that I teach in Abu Dhabi, at NYU Abu Dhabi, I'm reminding them like creativity and working the brain is like a workout, right? It needs to be trained daily. And there are times when, you're allowed to have it rest, but then you need to highly activate it because it is a muscle, right? The brain is a muscle. And so the more we work the muscle, the stronger it gets and the more it works in our favor at the end of the day.
Yeah, so you're an accomplished physicist and a professional ballet dancer, and sometimes we think those areas are very separate. You're not only mixing art and science, in a sense, you're not only mixing science and mysticism, but you're also fueling that creativity in both of the fields. How do you felt that when you began dancing more professionally, that really helped your creativity and your output and your curiosity in a field like physics?
I definitely found and have found, because I continue to do both, it's the it's a combination of things. So one is definitely, I think, allowing, the body to lead, and so you tap into more of like intuition, and allowing one to experience joy in different situations, and feeling all of those emotions and feeling all those different in different circumstances, like, fuel each other. So the joy that I get from a ballet studio coming back into the lab, it's like this really great cycle, because then I come back to the lab with more energy, and I want to explore problems in a different way, or I've been able to kind of rest my that part of my brain for a little bit, and I come back way more energized. And it's been a I can't imagine, I wouldn't have been able to tackle either, I think, as far if I just pursued one, at least for me.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a few studies on Nobel Prizes winners that, when they interviewed them at the end of their careers, they were saying that I didn't really feel that I was working. I felt that I was playing all the time, that I was having fun. I was in a state of flow, right?
Mm.
And it's great that we're legitimizing that, being in a flow in physics, in medicine, in chemistry, whatever. But now you're bringing in an art form, and a very physical art form, which is dance, that sometimes, like, at least in the scientific sphere, it's like, yeah, that's like a good distraction. It will keep you happy. It will keep you well exercised, but not really will full your scientific creativity. And I think that you have proven otherwise, and you feel it in your body. How has the journey of legitimizing playing at the intersection of both fields um, uh, been received all over the world where you're showing what you're doing?
I Sorry, can you phrase that question one more time?
Yeah, so we usually don't see scientists as dancers, and now
Mhm.
we see you not as a scientist who dances or a dancer who does science, but rather just like if it were the same in a sense. Um, how has the world received that new identity in a sense?
Yeah, good question. So it's definitely changed and morphed over the time. In the beginning, I really felt the pressure that I had to hide from the dance world I did science, and from the science world that I did dance. Because whenever they found out, it was like, oh my gosh, I'm like being disloyal. I'm not serious. I don't care. Like, even though I'm in the lab just as much as anyone else, it means like, yeah, I don't care about it as much. Um, and similarly in the dance world. And so for a long time, I was hiding from the two worlds. And then I think it was like towards the end of my PhD, where I'd graduated from Harvard in physics, and then I was doing my PhD in physics at Oxford. And by then, I danced with Zurich Ballet, Boston Ballet, Jose Mateo Ballet, and English National Ballet. And at that point, I was like, oh my gosh, it's more work hiding, like, from me, both of these worlds they do either, than the actual work itself, ironically. And so at that point, I was like, oh my gosh, why not? Like, why not both? And when and at the same time, I remember early on when I was hiding from both, I was like, oh, it was kind of the experimentalist brain in me that was thinking like, if I prove that it's possible, then the data speaks for itself. I don't have to argue. I don't have to like justify. I don't have to theorize. It's like a physics experiment. If there's data that proves it, then it's possible. And so at that point, I was like, okay, there's now data that proves it. And now I feel more freedom, uh and it's so amazing. The I do also gravitate towards places that are welcoming towards it. So at particularly NYU Abu Dhabi, for instance, I got recruited by Arlie Peters, who is the provost there. and he really wants to make NYU Abu Dhabi a multidisciplinary hub on the map. And so one feels that energy and one feels being welcomed, and it's a really great place for students and for myself who want to explore these different avenues together. And so it's, yeah, now there's more acceptance and respect and understanding, and but in the beginning it was quite tough.
Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, myself, I also think about myself as an interdisciplinary thinker. And yeah, I think about the expense of energy hiding from certain communities, right? To say, listen, I want to do a bit of everything. I want to be an expert on non being an expert. And those things are really difficult. And I really gravitate toward those people because I think that identity is not only um, mm, legitimate and you can choose whatever you want in your life, but I think it's very needed in science, in art, in technology, in every realm of study and practice. And we don't have enough narratives, academic programs, even famous people who cover large ranges of things, disciplines, and topics. Why do you think interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary approaches to life are needed for this century with all the ecosystemic problems that we are going through?
I think definitely a focus on the um okay, like bridging different paths and worlds, and that creative aspect is way more necessary now because AI and Siri and Alexa and technology, you can if you give it they can answer but pretty much any problem that normally we're taught in school, right? So one has to really train now, I think, the brain and the muscle in a way that it has a harder time bringing things together, right? It has a harder time being quote unquote creative in um a sensible way. So right now, right, like if you use ChatGPT, it's probabilistic in the, so it's very boring, right? Because it regurgitates whatever's like the most, probable way of answering that question. The part where humans come in is that if we train it the right ways, we can kind of think about the most improbable but creative answers and solutions. And I think the focus nowadays should really be on asking really good questions, because most of us have been trained to answer questions, whether it's SAT exams, final exams, AP exams, whatever it is. We answer, there's a question and then we answer it. But now technology can answer all of those questions. And if you look back in history, the best breakthroughs are always from a really good question. And so, like, for example, Einstein, he wondered, he was like, what would it be like if I was on like a light beam and looking at the electromagnetic waves? And then he came up with special relativity. Or Elon Musk, for instance, saying, can we reuse rockets? Because they're quite expensive. And then SpaceX was formed. So it's always the question, I think, that leads to a really great breakthrough. And so that's the part that I think, yeah, we need to focus on more.
Yeah, thank you for bringing the subject up of artificial intelligence and large language models. And I see you dancing with robots, and I would love to ask you, how are these robots being programmed to dance? Like, is there an algorithm that they must follow, or they, in a sense, teach themselves how to follow a rhythm?
So the fun thing is that there are a variety of ways that we can do it and explore it, right? So all of the options I would say it's all of the above in a way. So I have been exploring with really great programmers and roboticists, how one can use um, machine learning and motion capture to then teach a robot to dance, or how can you use these devices like a HTC Vive, the handset for a VR um, set. How can you use that for the robot to follow? Or, but often at the moment for performances, I tend to pre-program everything in the same way. So it's like choreography. In the same way that if you go see a dance performance, generally everyone knows where they need to be and at what time. Like you don't really see people running around and making stuff up on stage. It generally is pre-rehearsed. And so that's what I do for performances at the moment. I'm exploring how to make it a bit more interactive and pre-choreographed to have that element. Um, but yeah, it's a mix.
And how is it backstage when you are like improvising and the robot is improvising? How has that evolved in your body? Like how do you feel when you are interacting with a robot that it's also kind of finding its own rhythm in space?
The, the fun part, and often, um, and there's a great scientist in Oslo who worked with using a bunch of dancers in motion capture and then trying to have AI learn how to create movement based on different music. Her name is Benedicte. And one of the main results she got out of it was actually that the dancers loved it most when it was unpredictable, when it actually didn't really follow, but did something slightly different. So I've had experiences where I'll do a gesture and I expect it to also raise up, but what has happened is I've actually gone outside of its range, so it ends up doing a turn, and then I'm like, oh, okay, it's turning, so I'll turn too. So it's that part of it that's, I think, the most interesting and fun. um and that's always, I think it's the unpredictableness that is the most fun to play with,
Yeah,
doing all the time. I think
yeah.
there's that element. I mean, we do need work on the making sure it doesn't like swing and hit anyone in the head and get like,
Yeah, what I'm trying to see here is a parallel with
Mm.
basically, now that we're constructing the languages and the technological human interactions of the future so that we can keep evolving in these big crises that we have, poverty and pollution and climate change and all these things. And in a sense, I believe that human quality of being spontaneous, being intuitive, being not really algorithmic, mental, following the steps of question and answer. It's something that machines, I don't know, but will also have to be allowed to, right? Not only follow instructions, but also allow them to explore freely. Um,
Mm.
uh, for even from an artistic sensitivity, not only an intellectual one, right? So, do you see this happening? Like really interacting with machines through that sensitive, non-verbal part of our humanity?
I think machines are a little bit behind for sure at the moment. So they're not as advanced as, say, like large language models or like AlphaGo that played that ancient game of Go versus Lee Sedol, the human best Go player in the world. Um, so the robots and the machines are going to take a little bit longer in that process. But it, we're starting to scratch at the surface of what I found super fascinating watching the documentary of AlphaGo, which was the AI machine playing against the human and the humans who are experts being like, wow, it's like so creative. It's something we've never seen before. It's so bizarre. And and then subsequently humans learned from AI machines and weren't imitating. They learned and they themselves became more creative and advanced in their moves. So I could see that happening soon-ish with robotics. But right now, it's a little bit, they aren't, uh, I think we're just scratching at the surface of what they can do. And there's ways to make it mystical and a wow factor and awe-inspiring. But the reality of it is behind the scenes, there's a little bit less magic because there's also a lot of like safety protocols and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is a parallel of the eternal dance of the human species, which we are cyborgs. We not only cyborgs in the sense that we now have microchips, and we have been using technology and tools for forever, and that's been shaping how humans are in this world. So I think it has always been a dance, and it has always been a hybridization of man and machine, man and tool, right? Um, Tell me something. You go to many stages. You go to scientific stages, artistic stages, academic stages, corporate stages, general
Mm.
public stages. Um, would you do you adapt to different stages, or in a sense you see Merit trying to be the same regardless of the kind of stage you are in?
Interesting. I generally, well, because I normally give a talk with my performance, the talk changes based on the audience, but I think the dance doesn't. The dance, that's the part that's like the most me, like, yeah, no matter which stage I'm on, I generally get into a flow state where I even forget the performance when I get off stage. And no matter where I am, yeah, the performance and the dance is always the same. Unless the lighting is very off and, like the background noise is really like so that I get out of the flow state. But generally, no matter which stage I'm on with the robot performing, I go in, because I leave the world, I leave the earth. I don't know. I go someplace else. So I go to someplace else, but the same someplace else for every stage.
Yeah. What I loved about your presence on stage, and that's something that I advocate a lot, and Ken Robinson did it very well, which is making your audience feel, right? Not
Mm,
only think, not only question, not only wonder, but also feel something. And I think
mm,
that's the thing that make us not only remember the person who we have in front,
mm,
but the seed that presence uh, can be transformative in our lives. It's not just adding another piece of content and information, but a seed of an emotion that might trigger transformation and might trigger whatever we want to accomplish in life. So not as a teacher or as a performer or as an academic lecturer, but as audience, as being on the receiving end. How is it for you when you have transformative experiences as audience, be it in an academic setting or whatever setting? What makes you really say, yeah, this is something that goes into the deep of my being, and I feel it can change something in me, in my identity?
oh, well, thank you so much for what you said in the sense because I think it is what drives me the most is tapping and having people feel the emotions, the sadness, the happiness, the joy, the all of it. I think as a society right now, we're constantly trying to numb emotions and feelings, whether it's like by scrolling or drug, like whatever it is, we're like trying to numb. And even this, like my students who'll admit, they're like, oh, I'm feeling anxiety because of this big project. And towards that, I'm always like, it's great. like feelings are amazing. Like that's when the most creative ideas come. It's like when you're like the emotions is what that's why we're like humans. It's the most wonderful aspect of us is because of our range of emotions. And like feeling stressed or nervous or scared, like it's gonna pass. And it's so good to feel that aspect of it. So for audiences as well, like that's the thank you, because it's what's the most liberating for me when I'm on stage is I stop thinking and I really am like, if I try to make it the most giving thing, it's like people are sitting there and I want to help like have them feel something. Um, and so thank you for what you said.
Yeah, thank you. And at the same time, that's also the most vulnerable thing to do, right? Like to really have people experiencing the range of human emotion. It's because they are resonating with you, with your body, with your identity, with your mind, with and at the same time, it's because they are resonating with your present moment in the sense that you are showing who you are, right? And that's something that we usually also hide behind a choreography, behind a name, behind a performance. And to really be alive and to really make them feel what they feel is because you are feeling it too. And you are not really processing it or say, oh, I will use this to convey that. We're just being so much in the moment, which I think it's the most vulnerable. How do you manage that vulnerability, not only on stage, but in your life? And as a public persona, and what do you think about it as not only as a means for creative expression, but also to to go deeper into your own spiritual self in a sense?
It's I I'm trying to think how to answer this because it's it's a very good question. For myself, I think just personality wise, since I was little and till now, I haven't always been the most confident. I'm not always like, I've got this. Like I rarely feel that. I'm mostly thinking, I don't know if I've got this. But the part that has been very helpful is there is an element where I'm fearless. So like the analogy I could say is like if I'm up in a plane and someone's like, jump, I'd be like, I don't think I can really do this, but I'll jump anyways. And we'll just see what happens. So I do find that the vulnerability part of it is sort of an element of that in the sense that I haven't, yeah, I don't, that part is easy for me in the sense of like, and especially if it's a feeling or emotion, I'm like, no one can say I'm not feeling this way, right? Like, no one can say that's wrong or that's not right. It's because it's just how I'm feeling. And so sharing that element has always been for me on easier. And I tend to be so focused on growth or anything that I'm doing. Okay, it's from a younger age, like from when I was like in my 20s, like I would do a ton of auditions or even these talks and stuff. For me, it's always this isn't the final thing that defines me. This is practice for the next thing that's going to be even bigger. Um, and so that's sort of how I live my life, and also on publicly, like social media or these public talks. I always find it as practice, and so I think I don't feel the mm, I eliminate anything that would cause me to feel shame because I think shame is the main enemy of creativity. And so whatever, yeah. I don't know if
Yeah.
that answers.
Yeah, and I sense that that has something to do with your childhood and probably the way you were raised in the sense that I don't know, but probably your parents allowed for that exploration to continue without having to have the final thing that will define you. Is that so?
100%. I'm totally a product. I'm very gratefully of my parents. And it was, yeah, my mom, she filled the house with toys and sequins, and there was a whole room of, there was a library, and there was like putty and theatrical costumes, and every day, and like books on tape. We had no TV in the house, so it was constantly putting potions together that would stink the whole house. And like, bless them, because we would wreak havoc every single day, but that was part of it. And it was constant uh, positive reinforcement. So everything we did got a huge like hurrah, and like it was a lot of positive reinforcement as a kid, for sure. And it was myself and my sister, and since there were two girls in the house, my dad also reinforced being like, you know, girls are smarter than boys, like girls can do everything, girls are rough, girls are tough. And
And,
so
and what about the discipline? Because, you know, to pursue ballet professionally and to pursue a PhD in physics, you need a lot of discipline. Um, would that came after, like you were free to play, and then, you know, then what happened with discipline and really focus on a thing for a while?
I I it's one of those chicken and egg things. Like, definitely, I mean, I have memories of when I was little, I would just take things to an extreme level. I was just an extreme kid from a very young age. And I don't know if it's because my parents like minimized different type of distractions. So I could sit and work on a 3D puzzle with a book on tape for like 13 hours straight. Like, and my mother would come and try to feed me, but I would just get so obsessed. And so I think I had that type of personality a little bit. And then my both of my parents, like, my dad was very hardworking, and so was my mom. So I think just by seeing them, I just, they never told me um that I had to like sit down and do work. But just through example, I think it was like, oh, this is what you do. And my dad would say, like, oh, if you want to be exceptional at something, there's no such thing as like natural talent. Like, you have to work harder than everyone else if you want to be really good at something. If you want to be at the same middle, like, you can just work average. But if you want to be higher up, you have to work harder than everyone else. Just like, yeah.
Yeah, I love this because it's a kind of like serious play or playing seriously, right? And it's not really the one or the other. It's both at the same time, even when it's paradoxic or even contradictory. But that's exactly what we're talking at the beginning about being in a state of flow and mixing what we traditionally think they're separate realms of experience, right? In
Yeah.
that sense, so tell me a little bit about physics and what. Um, so I'm very interested about, or very interesting in the mysticism in physics, right? The spirituality, if you want to use that word, which I don't know if this is appropriate, but yeah, what about that world that physics is opening up since the last century to show us that we don't know much about reality, that it's not predictable, and that it's so much more infinite than a Newtonian universe?
I That's what drew me, was like all these mysteries of the universe that we don't know. It's like magic for adults. I love it. And there are elements of that. I think that definitely a lot, unfortunately, I think has been beaten out of me a little bit. Um, in the sense that I don't think it's taught the best way at the moment. Um, not not that I have the best alternative solution, but looking back in history, if you look at like Einstein and Heisenberg, and Schrodinger, like that era, I feel like it was a lot more conceptual, and they were thinking about things on like conceptual level. Whereas nowadays you're given a textbook and immediately you're given the equation and you're given like, more equations and more equations. Um, and then and you're kind of, it felt for me like that I meant to like memorize it and then regurgitate it or see the patterns. But conceptually, I think back in the day they had a better way of kind of understanding and processing it. So yeah, I think that there's so much there to be explored and understood. And I hope that there's a way to make it more inviting for more people to explore without scaring people away immediately with all the math.
Yeah, that's powerful because in those times the textbook didn't really exist, right? They were the ones who had to write it. And even it's the same with religion. The big proponents of religions, they didn't write the textbook was written after they were dead, and institutionalized religion.
Mm.
So
Mm.
so yeah, let's play with that a bit. Let's say you're giving the task of giving the first year of physics to entering students. Yeah, what would you probably try? Just as a playful question. No textbook. Let's say you have a bonfire, and that's it.
And this is great because I'm hoping to teach this class in January. Um, and what I how I wish physics was taught and how I want to teach it is starting at the top and then go down. So to start with the class and being like, look, you don't need a background in physics or mathematics, but let's start by going and interviewing and understanding like the company. There's a bunch of startups in quantum technology, bunch of companies. Let's go and try to understand what this space looks like now in the real world. Let's start to understand because it's like a new language. There's going to be a lot of terminology people don't understand. But let's start to understand, oh, okay, they're using ions or they're using superconducting qubits or they're using photons. We're just going to start hearing those words. And then I was thinking like having them try to explain to the class like what these companies did or invite someone from the company and have the students explain to them what they think the company is. And then that person who's the guest clarify some parts of it and expand on aspects that aren't on the websites or aren't available online particularly, and then kind of going from there and being like, okay, well, let's interview more companies, see what's different, like now let's really understand what an ion is. What is that? Like, let's understand a superconducting qubit. What's superconducting? What's a qubit? How do we, and then go down, 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 down. Then you start going with like currents and resistors and transistors and like then you understand like that part of the equations. But at first, like
Yeah,
let's get excited about what's happening.
yeah, I love
And
it.
it's worthwhile going deep for that particular student.
I love it because I studied economics as an undergrad, and yeah, it was like day one equation, supply and demand, right? Instead of going to see the stock prices of companies or what is economy for you, and how do you manage your money and what are your money wounds, right?
Yeah.
This podcast is heard by a lot of health professionals. It is the same. Like they begin with physiology and with cellular components and anatomy, rather than just probably go to a wellness retreat or a wellness conference and talk about the mind, the body, the soul, and then come back to the classroom and yeah, and go from there. That's powerful. I like it.
I like your idea too.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Like, how can we legitimize this idea of not starting with the textbook? And I think that's very powerful. It's not that we're throwing the textbook away, which all institutions would be very wary of, but let's not start with it.
I
Yeah.
know. I just wish, oh, yeah. Like I always wanted the professor to sit on the table and talk to me. Like just talk to me like we're talking about like going to the market, like apples, oranges, I don't know, just but no, it's like they turn their backs and then start writing on the chalkboard with all the equations. And my brain goes, I'm like, it's in the book. Why are you rewriting it? Like, just talk to me.
Absolutely. And I think that when even, because we are very young when we enter those careers, probably, those lecturers and teachers think that we see the world the same as they, like we adults believe that a child of 5 is seeing the world the same as you. And it's so different, right? So when they talk about supply demand or transistors and string theory, they believe that the entering student has already a basic conception of it, which we usually don't have, right? So playing around with those concepts, as you say, those words start to come up.
Yeah.
It's better because instead of just wondering, instead of just trying to think, no, trying to learn what those words mean, through a conversation, you start to piece together and wonder what those words mean, which is not the same, right? When you learn from conversation, that rather than when you learn from a textbook.
Mhm.
And I love that idea of just just being in a conversation with those people.
Yeah. For me, it's like if the students can't have a conversation with other students about the topic, like have a like talk about it over, then I haven't taught them well. Like if
Yeah.
they'd be able to converse with like an equation and showing an equation on that, then it's not. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I find that a lot of people in many disciplines, they start to fall in love with their discipline like 20 or 30 years after
Mhm.
they started studying it, right? Because they get an aha moment later in life. Oh, wow, that was taught in the first class of the first semester, but it took 30 years to really get that. Wow, I now see it, right? And maybe we can try to not push that experience, but at least set the environment so that those insights and those feelings arise easier at the beginning. Yeah, beautiful. And I also think we need to take out, now that we're playing with this, take out these chairs and boring tables and probably move around the classroom and go out of the classroom and walk around in nature or whatever. And then we start seeing about health and physics and religion, whatever topic we're trying to convey. Yeah.
For sure. I tried, although I tried that, I like removed all the chairs and tables from the classroom. And the first day, like some of the students were like panicked. They're like, is it a dancing class? I was like, no, no, no. Uh,
Yeah, but I think that's the point, right? It could be a dance class at the same time, and like feeling secure in our own bodies is part of the learning experience of whatever topic we're trying to teach, right? So we want to teach that sense of security, or at least that sense of you can jump into the unknown, right? And putting students in a bit uncomfortable position because dancing is uncomfortable to many. I think it's not a bad exercise to try. So yeah, you'll tell us how it goes.
I'll let you know.
Yeah,
I haven't tried that yet.
great. Well, Mary, thank you so much for this conversation. I really honor your work and your life. I honor your smile. I honor your movement, right? Because you're not only a brain walking around, but a body dancing around. And I think that's very much needed in all arenas of life. So thank you for that. And I don't know if you want to close with any final reflection or call to action, whatever you want.
Oh, I'm just so honored to be here. Thank you so much. I really appreciate how you, seem to see the parts that I really care about as well. And so it's just been such a pleasure speaking with you. And I'm sure I also would love connecting with your audience. If they want to connect with me, I'm on Instagram and Twitter and LinkedIn. Everything is Merritt Moore, my name, Merrittmoore. And yeah, I just love meeting like-minded people.
Beautiful. And you have to promise me, or at least not promise me, but open the possibility that once you are in space as an astronaut, we will have a 5-minute chat of
Yeah.
how does it feel to be talking with someone, lecturing someone with less gravity and really dancing in space.
Done.
Great. All right, Mary, thank you so much. You take care and enjoy the rest of your free days in Madrid.
Thank you. Gracias.
Thank you.